I am Sean Smith.
I'm Ben Schneza.
I'm Jake Stockhausen.
And I'm Terry Williams.
And we interviewed Elaine Stalheim, and we talked about segregation in Milwaukee, schooling in Milwaukee, the public school system, and the marches.
Hello.
Hello.
Could you please tell me your name?
Margret Stalheim,
Hi, Margaret. Where were you born?
Hartford, Wisconsin.
Where did you grow up?
Hartford, Wisconsin.
Could you describe your childhood experiences in Hartford, Wisconsin?
It was a very small town in those days. It was under 4,000 people. And you went to, it had a small town, but it did have the choice of 3 elementary schools. So you could choose to go to one of those. But then everyone went to the same high school. And I had a really nice childhood. I didn't have any brothers or sisters to fight with, so it was pretty good.
So how would you say you felt about growing up in Hartford, Wisconsin?
Fine. I think that after I grew up, and you look at it in retrospect, there were some things that I had to learn that city children already knew. And there was no diversity in my town. I mean, there was none. So that wasn't even talked about. So that was one of the things when I went away to school that I had to learn about.
Who did you live with during your childhood?
In Hartford. In a house? Yeah.
Did you have any family that you lived with?
Yes, my mother and dad. No one else, just my mother and dad and me.
Could you describe your experiences growing up with your mother and your father?
With what?
Growing up with your mother and your father, could you do?
Oh, it was very positive. It was very, I don't know exactly how it happened, but they were active parents, did a lot of things with me, and the expectations, while they weren't, always told, better than this or that, I didn't get that. But you knew what was expected. And I knew that I would go to grade school, that I would go to high school, and I would go to college. And I didn't think there was never any question as to whether that would happen.
What was your first school that you attended?
Washington.
Do you, when did you begin to notice ethnic differences?
When I went to college.
Could you describe your experiences at Washington?
At Washington Elementary School?
Yes.
Oh, it was fine. There wasn't anything. It actually was a forerunner by necessity of schools, the way schools should be run, some of them now, in that there were not enough students to have grades, like first and second, third and fourth, so you were all mixed up. It was like a glamorized country school, but it was a nice building.
Do you have any particular memories at Washington Middle or Elementary School?
Not really.
Was your first experience with ethnic difference positive, negative, or neutral?
Positive.
Why would you say that?
Well, I lived in a dormitory in Madison, Elizabeth Waters, and we did have black people that lived there, and we had Jewish people, and I had never encountered or had any experience with Judaism either. And it was very friendly, very positive. No one, it was just the way it was.
What middle school did you attend?
Pardon?
What middle school did you attend?
Middle? There wasn't one. You just went from elementary school to high school.
What high school did you attend?
Hartford High School.
Okay. How was that?
It was fine, you know. I think that particularly the political science class I had as a senior in high school was a forward-looking teacher that told about lots of the things that were happening, not necessarily in Hartford, but, you know, things that happened, and he explained it and what the causes were, and cause and effect. He did a lot of cause and effect, so he was very influential with me. We did not have in our high school any black people or any Jewish people. We had none in Hartford.
So how did you feel about the information that your political science teacher taught you?
How did
you feel about the information you received from your political science teacher?
Oh, I thought it was real good. Well, and for me it was very influential, and yeah, it was really influential because when I went to Madison and I encountered, you know, more than just in a book, I did not have that much any kind of a problem, and I think it was because he had talked about all this stuff, about the things. It was not that much. You have to realize this is in the old ages.
So, how do you think your parents would have responded to the teachings of the political science?
Fine. I never heard them say anything negative about it.
What was your, could you describe a typical day in elementary school?
In my elementary school? Oh, it was wonderful. It was really nice. A typical day was a very busy day, and the children came, many buses came to my school, like maybe 20 buses, and the children would come in not in lines because I do not like children lined up. So they would come in just like you guys come to school, you know, and they would come in, and there were 3 entrances, and I would rotate. I'd be at the top of the step to greet them as they came in. And then I got to know them, and they got to notice me too. And one of the little guys, and I won't take your time, he stopped, and he was about 8 years old, and he said to me, "You know everybody's names. Just what do you do around here?" And I said, "Would you believe I'm the principal?" And he says, "No," and he went to his class. So and then we, you know, children went to their rooms and stuff and did the things, and I moved about the building a lot, and I worked with individual children. And sometimes when I was really very upset, I would go into the first grade and paint a picture to relax. And they just knew me.
What did you study in college?
I studied social work, and then I went into teaching.
Why did you decide to study social work?
Because in Madison they didn't offer elementary education at that time. If you wanted a kindergarten degree, you had to go into the home ec department, and I did not want to do that. And I wasn't. No way was I leaving Madison. So I took social work.
What inspired you to become an elementary teacher?
Well, I think that for too long, people that are in power or that can have not put enough focus on early education. And early education, even 3-year-olds, but particularly 4, 5, 6-year-olds, their brains are like little sponges. They will learn anything, good or bad. So we should be working with them and helping them, and my big thing is to have them be responsible for their actions. And we do it in high schools and middle schools and say, you have to be responsible for your education actions. You do it when they're little, you're not going to have that many times. You know, like if you're responsible, you made that choice. So what are you going to do about it now? And so we talked a lot. And they talked, and I was in almost every classroom every day, place. And in my office, as I told Denise before, you take the word principal. Now, you know, when you're in education, it goes around like, you're the pal. Yeah, principal. Well, I really do think a principal is put in a school to help children. Isn't that what most of us think principals are supposed to do? And yet, if they're in some kind of difficulty, problem, they're sent to the office, to the principal's office, and the principal takes care of it. Okay, so if you really have something that you want to talk about, that you've been violated in some place, or something has been bullied, or whatever it is, are you going to go and tell the principal who hands out the punishments? No, you're not going to, because you associate punishment with the principal. So as a principal, they could only come to my office to read me a story or show me something that they did. Now, I took care of the problem. The teacher would call me on the internet and say that she needed help, and I would go and get the child, and we would go someplace and discuss the item. But we never did punishment in the office because I wanted them to be able to trust me.
When did you first know that you wanted to have an occupation in early education?
I always liked children under 4 feet tall. And I just like their minds are something that people are just not aware of how bright they are. When I taught in the classroom, I had a skeleton and I had a torso. They knew where the lungs were, they knew where the heart was. They were 6 years old. They didn't have any problem with that. And they didn't need to know it, but they did. So how much more can you teach them? I mean, you can teach little kids more than you can teach you. They learn the most between 5 and 10, I think it is the most in your life.
Did you have any jobs while you were in college at Madison?
No. I worked in the summer. And because when I worked in a shoe factory, and I had to pull this thing down, and it put the holes in saddle shoes. I can't stand saddle shoes to this day. And I said something to my dad that I really didn't like it, and my dad said, well, that's what you'd probably have to do if you didn't go to college. End of conversation.
What occupations did your parents have?
What occupation?
What occupations did your parents have?
My dad was a electrical contractor, and my mother was a nurse, but she could not, in those days, she could not be a nurse because she was married. They didn't allow you, if you were married, to be a nurse. She went to Margret, but she couldn't be a nurse.
Did your parents ever try to influence you to kind of practice their own occupation?
No. Mm-mm.
What jobs did you have after college?
The first one I had is I started teaching at 65th Street School in Milwaukee, which at that time was considered a outer school, on the outer ring, and a plum to get there. And I liked it. I had a kindergarten, first grade.
When did you move to Milwaukee and why?
When did I move to Milwaukee? This last time, probably in the 70s, right when desegregation whatever that was. I had to have residency to begin with, so, but it was right when desegregation started, maybe 2 years after I moved here.
Did you, do you recall participating in any desegregation, like marches or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. A lot of, my school was in the Sherman Park area, and there were a lot of small groups. They thought we were much bigger than we were because we made so much noise. But we just kept making noise and getting our way. But worked mostly in trying to get the schools desegregated. I guess that was it. How what was going to work, because the first run at this was intact busing, which was a miserable failure. There was no choice involved in intact busing. They just told these black kids that they were going to be moved to another school. That was it. And the attending schools were not always very friendly when they got there. And one of the schools I was in, where I was teaching, was a school that got black children. They had separate recesses, separate lunch hours, separate everything, and even separate rules. And so, yeah, you had to be kind of protective. And that's what happened to me, as I became very protective of one little kid, and he was a little pain in the butt, but he was a nice kid. But he was being, you know, excluded from school because he drank too loud at the drinking fountain. So, and he happened to need special needs, okay. So his parents, they were the only black people living in the neighborhood. And of course, you know, this was the day, here was a white lady, I wasn't old then, and so they had Mr. Barbie come to see me about it. And so when Mr. Barbie and I talked, he was really ex-ed is what he was. And he told the parents, you better leave her alone, because he's lucky that he's in her room, because he needs to go to ex-ed, and she's right about that. And so that I became very protective, not necessarily because he was black, but protective because it was unfair. It was unfair. I mean, to put these children on a bus, well, it was unfair. And so and then I was in small groups that what we were going to do about it. So then the next thing was desegregation.
Did you teach any of the intact buses classes?
And I had, no, I didn't. I had a very interesting thing with that, because I always had the idea that every child comes to school wanting to learn, and something happens to him or her in school and stops them, and then it's very hard to unstop them. And so the intact busing, they did not take bus 6-year-olds, first graders, and I asked if I could have 3, 4 in my classroom when I had first grade. And so they checked it out, and there were 4 parents that said it was okay to they would send their children into my classroom. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful, and they did very, very well, you know. And we had some, before they came, we had some preparation, real simple things. And the kids didn't think anything of it. So then the parents came for, you had to make friends with the parents too. And because you could never be negative about the parents. It's off limits. And so this one mother kept saying to me, yes ma'am, yes ma'am. I said, don't you have a name or something that you could call? My name is Margret, what's yours? You know, I tried to make them comfortable, and they were. And the little kids were good. I had little techniques before they came in. I'll have to tell you a funny one because we always opened every morning with a big circle where we had a little conversation. And that day we were going to talk about the color of our skin. So we went around and mine is white, and this is white, and this is white. And they were, one was called, what's his name, Eddie. They were darker and stuff like that. Okay. So then they all got up, and later I heard them, one kid say, "Man, Eddie is really lucky. He's got much more piggy than any of us." So it was a simple little thing. You don't have to give them a big lesson that lasts an hour and a half. Only me. I talk too much.
Do you have any particular memories of the segregation march or the desegregation marches?
Yeah. Yeah. I think they were pretty positive. There was every kind of a person in them. Every kind of a, you know, it was mostly school-oriented ones that, on the school board that we were after for changes. And I don't think I don't have any negative things, and anything that happened like the police coming after us, I don't remember that. And maybe I don't want to.
In the intact busing program, was it just an exchange of like white and black students, or were there like Latino, Asian, other cultures?
Yes, it was just black, because the segregation and the intact busing was not with the desegregation, it was before. But the frame of mind that most people had was what was going to come down as a federal law. And the federal desegregation law says black and non-black. And a lot of people don't realize it's just black and non-black. And so in the schools, well, you go on with your intact busing, because I know what comes next.
I'd actually like to go a little bit back and ask, how did you how did you get the job, your first job after college, so the teaching job?
How did I get my very first teaching job? I just really, you know, it's just almost embarrassing. There was such a shortage of teachers. And I was student teaching, doing the last lap of my student teaching. And this woman from the central office came to Townsend School, where I was doing the student teaching, and said she'd like to talk to me. And I said, well, I'm busy right now, you'll have to wait. And she was the lady that was going to hiring people. I'm having her wait in the hall. So I went out, and she said, do you want to teach for Milwaukee? And I said, sure. End of job, end of interview.
So was there a particular process in determining which school you would teach at? Or?
They just told me, well, they asked me if 65th would be all right, and I said, sure, it wasn't too far from my house.
What did you expect going into that job?
I expect that I would help children to learn. I don't know. Classes were big, 47, 48, 5 and 6 year olds. I don't know what I expect. I expected to do a good job. I guess that's right. And my job was to teach them. So I expected that it would not, I did not expect it to be difficult. That's opposite of today.
Would you say that it was difficult for you
No.
at first?
No, it wasn't difficult.
So, transitioning from the student teacher to a teacher, was there any struggle in that?
No.
Were you mentioned in a book?
Pardon?
Were you mentioned in a book?
Yeah.
What was the name of the book?
I think that he calls me Elaine in the book, doesn't he? I think so. My name is Margret Elaine, and I use Margret professionally but I've known those Paul Geenan and some of these other people for a long time. We worked together to all the things, and they call me Elaine. So it's like my friend was with somebody one time, and he said, "Who's this person you keep calling Elaine?" And she said, "You know, the one you call Elaine, you call Margaret, we call her Elaine. Most people call me Elaine."
So how did you get two names?
The first girl in my mother's family is named Margaret or Mary, and I'm the Margaret, and I have 5 cousin Marys. I don't even think Paul Geenan knows that my name is Margaret.
Why did he write about you in this book?
Oh, basically about how we handled things and how we worked with parents and brought a school from that was doing very poorly, and how by changing the curriculum and changing the attitude of everybody, you know, and using parents and community and everyone to be in on the getting a good school running, we were able to change that. And I'm not a great person for testing, but I do it when I need to do it. And when we went there, the 92 percentile, the kids were 29 percentile in an achievement test. And in 2 years, they were 95 percentile. So we did what was right. Then we felt good. But there's a thing to that, too. There's a thing to everything. Because many times when you take these tests, you know, the achievement tests, and you do well or you don't do well, and if you don't, no matter what you've done, it's over with, and you put the thing away and never look at it again. But we studied those to see where the you know, the places where that they needed help, and then we worked those into our curriculum, and that's what tests are for. They're not designed to trap you. They're supposed to be designed to help you. And one time they were having a hard time with atlases and almanacs. Couldn't get it into their heads. So my learning coordinator, who I was a coordinator with, made a little song. If you want to know what it's all about, you look in the almanac. If you want to know what it's at, look in an atlas. They never messed that one up again.
Did you have any particular goals going into teaching?
Any particular what?
Goals?
Yeah. I wanted you all to be brains. I wanted every child to do the best they could and to be proud of themselves. To be proud of themselves. To take, no matter what you did, if you were an average student, be proud of it. No matter what you did, I wanted you all to be proud and to become good citizens, good people, and to do what you loved. I just wanted the best for all of you.
Did you acquire any new goals later on?
I was, when I moved from 65th to 38th, I had a little bit more freedom with what I was doing, because at 65th I was doing a lot of that stuff, but it was really underhanded stuff. But when I went to 38th, it was right out there in the open. And so then my goals became very clear that, yeah, I wanted not only the students, but I wanted the teachers to be happy about what they're doing too. I just wanted everything to work out right, because Pollyanna, that's what I am.
When you said you were doing like underhanded things, could you elaborate on that?
Well, he's gone now, so I guess I can say it. had a principal that didn't like any noise, any place. You had to put your coat just so on the thing. Well, I'm having these students that you can sit any place you want to as long as you hold it together. And if you can't, I'll decide for you. It's your decision. Where do you want to sit? So they move around the room all the time, and they were doing all kinds of stuff. And he wouldn't have liked that. So I told them, when Mr. Growth comes around, you all sit down real fast and look at your paper. And they did. And they sat down real fast, and he would say to me, oh, you have the best behaved class, just because they were all sitting in their seats. He didn't know. But when I had my own school, it didn't matter to me.
So when you had your own school, what kind of things did you do?
Well, it would take a real long time for me to explain it all. But Schools Without Failure, I don't know if I've mentioned that book before. It's a very good book to read. It's probably outdated by now. But it was one of the sources that we used for it. And schools, all rooms started with a meeting in the morning, and they would sit in a circle and get to discuss anything you wanted to discuss. But if you wanted to take a turn discussing, you didn't raise your hand. You just watched as somebody stopped talking. Then you had a turn. Because isn't that what grown-ups do? You don't sit in a circle and raise your hand when you're in a grown-up thing. So why don't we learn it when we're 5 or 6? So we did. And then at the end, it was my turn, and then I would tell them what their assignments were, what they were expected to do. And they'd go off to do it, and then they'd have it checked. And having it checked was not necessarily by me. I had 5th or 6th graders that came in to check to see if they got it right. Made the 5th and 6th graders feel good, too. And then afternoon, if they were finished, we met again before lunch. And then told if you're finished or not. And if you're not finished, put your name up on the board, and you can't choose anything for afternoon activities until you get your name off the board. Your choice, not mine. That's the way we ran the school.
What was your involvement in magnet schools?
I was principal one. I was the principal one, yeah.
What did your particular school?
It was open education. It was, individualized education, and just about what I've been telling you, that's all part of open education. Yeah, it was, we did not have grades like 92, 93, or ABC. We had narrative progress reports. And you can say as much, if I could say, Adam is doing well in math, he's doing this fine. We are helping him in phonics. Okay, do you know he's having trouble in phonics from that? Sure you know it. You don't have to put an F down there or say he doesn't get it, because you've got to keep working on him. Okay, and so that was one of the things that we had, and then we did not have, you weren't in 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade. We were in Mr. Schumann's room or Mr. So-and-so's room. We were age grouped. 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, 7, 8, and 9-year-olds, 9, 10, 11, and 12-year-olds. And that's the way you worked. With the room, the grade number, like 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, had only for statistics did I have to take care of that. But you just say, it's Mrs. Schumann's room, or it's Mr. Lupke's room, or whatever. And that is, and it was all individualized. And they were, and so many little things. A lot of people don't want to pay much attention to the little things because they take too much time to get them developed, and it does take time. You can't just say, I'll do this, and it will be over with. You know, you have to be consistent.
Do you have an example of the little things that you're referring to?
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of little things that, like I think it's I'm trying to think now, some that I didn't mention already. Well, little things like behavior, okay, which seems to be a real big thing in schools. Well, we talk about behavior all the time. And what do we say about behavior? Well, you misbehave, I'm going to, whatever you call that, have you leave for the day or whatever. So we had a 1, 2, 3 system that number 1, if you came in telling me that some little kid beat you up, yeah, that would be a J. But you come in, you have to identify what the problem is, number 1. We're not going to talk about what, okay, now that it's happened, what are you going to do about it? Because it's past. And so you come up with it. If you repeat this, there's 2 choices in that. You call your mother and tell her what you've done, or I take you home. What's your choice? They did not like me to take them home. That was not one of their favorite things to have happen. That's a little thing. But once they got that into the mind that they are in charge, it's their, it's your decision. It's not mine. It's your decision. If you want what kind of punishment you want, it's your decision. And so we kept that up with everything. It's your decision, And that went through to what you wanted to read. You can't just do it with this little stuff. But that helps. But what book do you want to read? I had one kid in 1st grade, he wanted to read Paul Revere. We weren't quite sure about that one, but he was really interested in Paul Revere. So the teacher got some books, they got some books about it, and somebody read to him about Paul Revere, and he was real happy, and he was a good reader, but that day he didn't read in his regular group.
How did the narrative method come into being in comparison to the grades?
Well, the narrative is not that unusual because Alverno uses it. Alverno, I taught at Alverno after I retired, and we had a narrative a response too. And sometimes, for some situations, it becomes necessary where somebody is going to say, you're applying to graduate school, for example. You're going to have grades. So you have to, we have to be able to put what we wrote into grades for you. And that's part of the things that we have to do. We have to realize that if we're going to do this and depend on this for our way of with parents, that if it's necessary to be put into grades, that we will do so. And Alverno does it very successfully. I love teaching there.
Going back to the 1, 2, 3 method, have you ever had to take a kid home?
I took one home. And he was hanging on my leg all the way down the wall, screaming at me they would never do it again. I said, just don't even talk to me. It was your choice, and I don't want to hear about this. But I took him home, and the mother was a little bit, but it was okay. And they didn't. We discussed it with the parents, and with the mother was home, and it wasn't a big problem. It's the only one that I took home. I can't remember. I took him home because he was swearing on the bus. Nowadays, I suppose it's common. Huh?
Have you ever reconsidered your choice of going into teaching?
No. No.
How did you meet the author of the book you were in?
I never met him. I used his book, and then one summer I went to London. 3 teachers and I went to London to go to their schools who were using Schools Without Failure. And so we worked in their, I observed in their schools, and the 3 teachers worked in their schools and became quite affluent in using it.
What is the name of the book again?
Schools Without Failure. And that's what we wanted to be.
So did you notice any big differences in the London schools?
In what schools?
In the schools in London?
Oh, yeah, they do things differently. Well, they do a lot of really wonderful things, but their attitudes towards some things, like the boys and girls have Phi Ed together, and that's fine. But this little girl was a 3rd grader, and she had a T-shirt on that had big holes all over and not in the right places. And I couldn't imagine that they could be in the same thing. And I said something to the teacher, and she said, "Oh, you Americans and your sex business." And so I just shut up. I said, "Well, if that happened in the U.S., the police would be in the school." No, they're a lot more lax. They're more lax. They're lax on the playgrounds and stuff like that, but their education thing is very, very good. Very good.
Would you say that sexism was ever an issue while you were teaching?
No.
What are some of your views on today's school system?
I don't know. I don't know, because I go back to the segregation, and you know, and I know why the segregation after the miserable intact busing, and that was miserable. So anyway, I'm sure that they all sat down, and at this time there was a commotion going on in Detroit, and they didn't want it to happen here. So they thought, well, how could we do it? We'll develop some schools, we'll put them in the central city, and we'll have the people come to us. And that's what they did. And first of all, the ones that didn't think anything is right thought, well, you never have white people go to the central city, you know, but they did, because the schools were good and the curriculum was good. They had gifted and talented. They had Montessori, they had IGE, they had language schools, and they had open education. We all had enough, and we had waiting lists. The white people came. Now, the black children could go to suburban schools if they chose. White children could not. And some chose, you know, because, but a lot of them stayed. And I asked one woman whose 2 children were in high school one time, well, I'm surprised, why didn't you put honor in a Wauwatosa school? I don't know which school I think, but I think. She says, why would I do that? She's getting a good education here. Oh, you don't know how good I felt. You don't know how good I felt. So anyway, it was a success. And almost everyone that went to one of those schools, and then they went on to Jackie Robinson and some other ones into the high schools were King and Riverside, were the 2 that were there were 2s. And we were marching by 2 or something like that. They did the job. Okay, why didn't it work all over other places? They didn't pay enough attention to those that didn't get in. You know, like, for example, there was no criteria that you had to have to get in, okay? Just be alive and walking. And so you got applied to my school, and I'm closed. I don't have any room. So you have to go to an attendance area school. And you don't even have a choice. You're going to go to this school, okay? So how do you feel? Do you feel rejected? Would you feel rejected? Sure you would. How would your mother feel? Rejected. How would the teacher feel where you're going? I'm not as good. I'm in a school that's not a magnet school. We did not, for some reason, pay enough attention to the non-magnet schools. we got a lot of attention. Believe me, we got a lot of stuff too. And you could pull things off, could say, if you don't give me a music director, you get it. I'll get my parents after you. Woo-hoo, you get what you want. And, but, so not enough attention was paid to those other ones. Both people that went in, they went into the school they applied to, and they went into the other school. And they had the same abilities. There's not one smarter than the other. But this one thought they were smarter than this one. And this is where all the fights started. And maybe the bullying. So I think that we have to pay more attention to schools. We don't have the magnet schools much anymore, but I think that we messed it up. So what do I think about today? What do I think about today? I don't think it's all students' faults, and I don't think it's all teachers' fault. But I guess I am a little tired of hearing, well, look at what they're coming from. They, you know who they are? That's they, okay. And I'm a little tired of hearing that. Yes, these children are coming from poor areas. They're coming from areas where families are messed up and they don't have a good environment to live in. All kinds of things that are wrong. And they're coming to school. And we have them 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. What can we do about their background? Nothing. I can't get jobs for them or do any of that. So let's do what we can in the 5 hours that we have each day, and try to be positive about it. For example, if a kid really comes and causes a big fracas, okay, or something like that, take the time. The books will always be there. The math will always be there. Take the time to sit down and say to this kid, tell me, why did you choose to do that? Just talk to the kid. Just talk to them. You'll learn an awful lot if you talk to a kid, who their mother likes and who she doesn't. But anyway, so I think that teachers have to give up their timetable, that it has to be done at this time, and spend more time talking to kids. I like to talk to kids.
Did you ever feel hopeless in the attempt to desegregate?
No, I didn't. I thought we were going to do this really. I did not see that either. I did not see that about not paying attention. I did not see that, and I wish that I had. And I don't know what I could have done about it, but I certainly would have tried. But I don't know. The thing is, people have to. You got a job, and you got to be positive about it. I mean, I don't know. I get very frustrated when I hear I'm retired for a long time, and I hear people say, "Oh, thank goodness I don't have to go to school anymore." I feel sorry about that, because I never felt that way. I always liked going to school. But you see, they didn't enjoy their jobs. Not if you talk that way, then they maybe should do something better, something else. I don't know. So today, they should have smaller classes. They should have more in early childhood education. They should have focus in on 4 and 5 and 6-year-olds and teach them something beyond just baby stuff. Teach them real skills. And I think there'd be a big difference, especially if you could get the 5 and 6-year-olds to come in. You guys are pretty old by them.
Were you ever married?
Yes. long time, 56 years.
Wow. What was your spouse's name?
Philip.
Did you have any kids?
I have 3 boys. I have 3 children, 3 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
So, yeah. My oldest son is, right now, he's in Egypt, helping the farmers with new techniques. He's a veterinarian. And middle one is a musician. And the younger one is, if you ever want to go to a good concert, it's present music, by the way. Contemporary classical music, you should all go. There's my ad for the day. And then my youngest one lives in Washington State, and he's a city planner. All different.
Would you say that your kids affected your teaching style at all?
No, I don't think so.
Why did you choose to retire?
I wanted to go out when there was still people were saying good things about me. I was old enough. My husband had retired 3 years before, and that really was probably the trigger, because it wasn't that I minded going to work when he didn't. It was that he wanted to move up north and live on a lake. And so I hardly could teach and live on the lake, so I went.
What do you think was the most important or the most diverse thing about Schools Without Failure?
But schools without what?
Schools Without Failure. The book.
I didn't get it.
So, the teaching method of Schools Without Failure, what do you think was the
Oh,
most
I
important?
see. Okay. Basically what I was all talking about. You know, it's about to teach children to accept responsibility for their actions and for things like that, you know, basically like that. And also you know, there's so many things that you can learn with these things. Like this is just simple. They sat in this big round circle like this, and then it's time to go. And we always left clockwise. You got to teach them time too, so they learn that real fast. I mean, you got it done. You just have to think. That's all you have to do is think. And you know, it was always a nice. You know, I felt comfortable. I liked teaching because I felt comfortable. I was respected, yet they felt comfortable talking to me. Like one day, this one kid said to me, "Are you Jewish?" And I said, "No." He said, "Are you Catholic?" I said, "No." And he said, "Well, what else is there?" But he was willing to talk to me, you know, just. I said, "Well, there's Lutherans, and that's me."
How did you feel about your marriage? Or how do you feel about it?
Oh, it's fine. He would make 56 or 7 years. I mean, it's got to be okay. Not going to talk about it anymore. I mean, like my husband died 10 years ago. So that both of us were only children. I was an only child, and so was he. And you know, they say that's dynamite, but I don't know. We didn't fight. He was very calm. I was.
Could you describe your relationship with your children?
Well, they're really nice kids. I really have nice kids, and they're very they're very respectful and equal rights for women and for everyone. You know, they really are really conscientious about that. And And they all three are in careers that they wanted to be in, so no one ever told them to be in any of them. I don't know. I'm real happy about their respect for each other, because I was telling Denise before, when they were younger, I kind of worried a little bit about 5 years difference in ages, but they are so close. It just makes me feel really, really good. And they are, you know, when I decided to not go south, I went south 15 years in the wintertime, and then I decided to come back. And my oldest son says, "Whew, we've been wanting to tell you that for a long time." But they didn't tell me. They don't tell me unless it's something that's really necessary. That's fine.
Did you purposely apply any of your the teaching methods that you practiced in school with your children?
I think so. I think so. Sometimes I got a little bit unnerved with things that were happening in theirs, and so I had to have a little conversation with the teacher.
Do you have any particular memories with your children during their youth?
Of my children what?
During their youth?
Mm-mm.
You mentioned that you brought up certain issues you had with their teachers. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, my youngest one was a pain in the something. And he is very good in math, and so he finished his stuff real fast, and then he'd fool around. And that's what you do. I mean, you all do that. If you're allowed to just sit there and you finish your stuff in a hurry, what do? You goof off. That's what you do. And so I got called to school because that's what he did. And I said, well, then maybe you should give him more difficult math. And she said, oh, I can't do that because of his behavior. I said, if you do that, maybe he won't have time for that behavior. Oh, I don't know. So he gets to high school, and it's algebra. And so I'm getting this call from the principal that David has to be put in an accelerated class. And I said, yes, I think he did too, and I thought that before. So I said to him, David, they're going to put you in an accelerated math class. And he said, who, me? I can get an A and do nothing. And that's exactly what in my school. So think about it. In a traditional school, you have some kids that don't learn fast, maybe don't say slow, that don't learn fast, some medium, and some really quite bright children. Who gets the least attention? The bright kid. Because they do everything they're supposed to do, they're at the top of the class. But they're not being challenged. They're allowed to sit there and waste their time in school. You waste it outside of school.
What changes, if you were to make any, would you make to the current school system?
What changes? Well, number one, I put more emphasis on early childhood. And second, I would be a little bit more in for training, and training on not to get the scores up on a test, but human relations, and how do you do this, and not just like an hour class, and practice it. You know, just practice it. We could all sit here right now and we could practice some of those things, but you all got your mouths glued shut.
Did you ever assign any memorable projects to your students?
Did I ever see them? Well, yeah, I suppose. I wrote a curriculum for 5 and 6-year-olds in economics, and for the Joint Council on Economic Education, and I won the first place. And so, because I taught my little kids economics. What is it? You know, opportunity costs. That sounds big, doesn't it? What is it? It means if you choose this, you can't choose that.
Would you say that we've progressed at all since when you were?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I think that the schools that are having the attention, a lot of attention, and those schools that are Montessori schools, there are now 10 of them. They're doing quite well. The language experience ones are doing fine, and but the one problem was with the language experience. It was hard to get black children in there. Parents didn't trust it. They didn't work that out right so that they could trust them. I don't know what it is today, but see, because you go when they're 4 years old and you don't learn to read until they're 7 or 8 in English, and I can understand how that happened because the parents were afraid that they're not going to learn. I can understand why it happened. So, I mean, they have to do something about that. So,
Revisiting the desegregation marches, how did you come to participate in them?
mainly through the Sherman Park thing, because at that time, where was I living then? Oh, I was living on 98th Court. Yeah, it was, and that was not where I was living. There were probably just 2 people that would go along with the marches, and probably did, but I wouldn't ask them. One of them was, well, they both immediately put their children into schools on buses.
Could you describe your emotions while you were marching?
Kind of revved up, and they kind of hopeful that somebody will notice because you're nonviolent, and they were nonviolent, most of them, and it'd be interesting because my son Kevin is going to take me this spring to places where there were desegregation, Selma and other places like that, and he's going to have it all out so that I can go visit where all these happened, where they had, the school where they changed it. So now you asked me that question, I diversed from that. Yeah, you felt good that you were doing something instead of just sitting there. You were doing something, and I think the big thing about the marches was, number one, you got focused and you got attention for what it was that you're marking, so that they had to listen to you no matter what because you were talking there. But you made other friends. You made friends in the group because there were people you didn't know. And you came with people that you knew, but there were a lot more people that you didn't know. And so you got to know other people. And I think that was real helpful. Yeah.
How were you immediately treated when you decided to participate in the marches?
Well, you know what crazy is? When I decided to voluntarily leave 65th Street School for 38th Street School, they thought I was crazy. How could I possibly leave a situation where I had a very good teaching, environment, and It was a wonderful school. And go down to the central city in the worst police district and go on marches on top of it. Oh, she's crazy. There was only two teachers there that would not feel that way. And, you know, you can't just, in schools, you can't just hire anybody you want to. You have to go through certain union procedures. And I wanted those two teachers in my school. And I got them. And they were two of my best teachers. One was the one, Paul, who the girls all fell in love with, but he couldn't touch him. Yeah, the other ones, I have not had any connection with them at all since I left that school, because when I was teaching in the classroom, there was a room right across the hall from me, and I heard this teacher screaming at the kid, "You can't do that now, you're not in Mrs. Stalheim's room." So I don't have many friends there that I remember. And that's the way, so no, that's the difference. I would never scream at a kid. I mean, I might get mad at you, really angry, but I'm not going to holler at you. And the children weren't used to being hollered at. They really weren't. And unfortunately, the school was going down in enrollment, and they went from my room to her room. So the next year, I kept them for 3 years. Same class, 3 years, for 3 years. And I asked the parents, and not one parent cared, you know, because I was afraid that somebody would say, well, they're going to be teased, they flunked, they this and that, but they didn't. I just taught them 2nd and 3rd grade, you know. And then I went to my friend Chris, who was the 4th grade teacher, and I asked her if they were behind for being, you know, in my room for 3 years. She says, no, they were just fine. So they skipped that lady that was screaming. That's what you had to do. So don't mention my name to any of them. They will never say anything nice.
Were you surprised by anything during the desegregation marches?
You know, I was surprised by, you know, the special master. You know, you had a special master. Did you know that? Okay. It's federally funded. It's federally ordered. It's an order from the federal government that you desegregate the schools. So you had a special master. And he came through about every other week, came through the school. And if I was ever intimidated by somebody, and I seldom are, I just kind of tensed up when he was coming the first times. But then after a while, he said everything was going fine. But he came home, see? He came to school to check to be sure that I had, number one, that I had the right number of minority and the right number of this and that. Nuts. But you had to do it. And to see that the classrooms were balanced and that the children were being in active pursuit of an education and what was all happening, and he always was really happy. Then I relaxed a little bit more. But it was like a little intimidating, a special master from the federal government coming to check you out, you know. And he did, and so that was, yeah. So that was one of the things I remember about it, and then, you know, that the way that we were doing that school, before I was the principal, Fawn, and that's spelled F-O-Y-N-E, and she hates it when anybody spells it any way differently than. She and I were the coordinators, curriculum coordinators for the school. And Evelyn Jabs was the principal. And I'd like to give her an awful lot of credit because the way that Fawn and I saw the school, we wanted it to go this way. was not the way that she liked things. But she bit the bullet, and she just thought it's got to be the way that things, the future. And so she would just swallow it and let Fawn and me do what we wanted to do. So we had the luxury of 2 years. She was before she retired. 2 years of Fawn and me both being able to be in these classrooms a lot and changing what we didn't like. Or, no, that's not a good word. Changing what could be done better. Because didn't like is a negative word. You shouldn't use that. And so we had that. And then I became the principal. And then Fawn had to do all the other work. But you see, that was the specialty school, magnet school. 2 of us. 2. To develop and get that curriculum on target. That's a luxury. Because those are 2 big salaries that you've got there. And you do give up some things for it. But not that much. But like to get a librarian, because Fawn and I wanted a librarian, she had to give up an assistant principal to get it. But for the 2 of us, and then after she retired and I became the principal, they didn't replace me. So things were going down.
What inspired you to go from 35th Street School to 38th Street School?
From 65th?
65th.
Yeah. Before, as I said before, I always had this, all kids want to learn. And it's something that happens to them when they get into school. It turns them off, or they're hurt, or something. I don't mean physically hurt, I mean emotionally hurt. And I wanted to, that's why I wanted those 6-year-old kids from, where were they from? They were from like 12th Street or something like that. That's why I wanted them, because I wanted to prove that they were no different than anybody else. They'd learn the same way. And that's my philosophy, that all kids want to learn. And it's our job to find a way to teach them. Period.
Was there a specific event that triggered your desire to leave?
Pardon?
Was there a specific event that...
I don't know. I think that I just always feel that way. I think that everybody should be given a chance. If you want to go out or pole vaulting and you're 4 feet tall, you're probably not going to make it. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. And then you will probably find out that you can't do it.
In our pre-interview, you mentioned the movers and shakers of Sherman Park. Can you elaborate on that?
I wrote down their names so I wouldn't forget them. Oh, Paul Geenan was one of them. And then Jackson's, and I can't remember, his name is Dr. Jackson, I know that. And Nelson, and her husband was a pastor, and then Mary Jo Kenny. Her husband was a pastor, and she was our librarian. But there were a lot, not a lot, but there were several professional people, and some biracial couples. Not too many, though, a couple. But there were people that weren't any of those things. And, for example, Dr. Jackson, you know, nobody called him Dr. Jackson to begin with, but I'm saying that just so you know. And somebody like blank, 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 they got along with him just as fine as anybody else. They were not impressed by the fact that he was a physician. because they were all doing something they wanted to do. They were going to make this school a desegregated school with an integrated community, and it's going to happen. And they can only happen if they do it en masse. And they did. Special master was kind of something funny, though. He got paid, too.
What was your relationship with the special master?
We got along real fine after I got a little bit more. After the first time, I thought, oh, my God. I could. Oh, jeez, I laughed because the special master is coming. And we don't, when we teach in the classroom, you don't come in like in September and see all the stuff all up, and the ABCs are up there, and the, you know, the alphabet cards are up, and everything in the room looks just marvelous. Well, in our program, we didn't believe in putting all that stuff up. That you just did it as you used it. Like if you're talking about A words, you put the A card up. We didn't. Special master came right at the beginning of September. We didn't have anything in the classroom. And we had notification that he was coming at blank blank time. So I alerted all the teachers. Oh my God, you never saw anybody work so fast in your whole life. Everyone put their whole rooms up, all the alphabet cards and everything, and it was just like you know, worked up, and it was amazing. And he went away, and they took them all down again. And then they started doing what they wanted. But after our first time, when he wasn't at all like that, we you know, it was like kind of having God. Well, can't say the principal, I mean the president, because I wouldn't want him to come. But yeah, somebody really important, a VIP, that was going to come and assess how you're doing. It was kind of like you were afraid he was going to say, it wasn't right. We had a quarter of a kid off. Should have been in the other class or something. He didn't do anything. He was nice.
Did you ever have any encounter with Father Grappi?
No, I didn't, but I had a lot with the, I'm trying to think of, no, I did not. Did he come out to my school? I'm trying to think if he came out to 65th. I can't remember. Several of them came out to talk about this one kid that needed special education, and his parents didn't think so. No, I don't think so. It wasn't him. It was, oh, the other one. Everybody was so afraid of him, and I thought he's just a man. Forget it.
Where did you live when you first moved to Milwaukee?
Where did I live? First time, we lived on 41st. No, first time we lived in Cass Street. We moved from Madison here after we were out of Bachelor Street on Cass Street. We lived in, you know, in those days, people that took care of buildings, they often got paid by having apartments as a part of their rent. And it was very hard to find a place to live in Milwaukee in '49. It's just awful. Some of my friends rented a place. They were so excited. And then they found out there wasn't a kitchen sink in the place. But anyway, we rented this English basement apartment on Cass Street, right near the school. Lincoln? Is that Lincoln School? I think it is. Something, the high school there. I think it's Lincoln. And it was okay. It was better apartment, better than living with your in-laws. That's your choice. And so we lived there for about 5 years. And then we moved to 98th and north of Silver Spring. And we lived there until I retired. And then we had lived in Menominee Falls for 25 years, and then I had to have a residency at that time. And so my husband didn't say anything. We just moved to Milwaukee. He said, if that's what you want to do, that's what we'll do. And so when he wanted to go up and live at the lake, I guess I owed him, you know. So we went up there, and then he died, and then I moved back to the city. And my friend that was she was our supervisor. She says, I didn't know what the heck you were doing up there and that. and I said, well, they didn't stay all year. I mean, I went to Southwest. That was another interesting thing. I worked in the schools, not for pay, just volunteered in the schools in Arizona, and it was interesting. They have similar problems, but they don't call them black and white. They call them, you know, Indians. One of them is the problem for them, and Mexicans. So some of them do well with them, and some of them don't.
What was the demographic of the area you were in?
What was the demographics here?
Your first housing.
In the what?
When you moved to your neighborhood, what was the demographic at the time?
It was pretty wide. Yeah, it was. At 98th, let me think. I think there was only maybe one black family. Maybe two. And it's kind of a street, you know, it's off of Fond du Lac, and you go in there, and it's a cul-de-sac, and it's a dead end. It's just a cul-de-sac, and there were 10 houses. And I'm trying to think, in those 10 houses, there were no black people. And then down here at the bottom, there was one that lived next to my friend. But no, there were many. I don't know.
So did you witness the demographic change over time while you lived on 98th Street?
Yeah, I think so. As houses began, the person next door to me was a detective who hated his job, and he retired, and he couldn't wait to get out of the city. And then a black lady and her son moved in there. And that was while I was still there. And then I think a black couple moved in the corner. But yeah, it was changing. I think there was an Asian person that came too, but no Latinos. None that I can think of right now. That I was not real active in that neighborhood. I needed to have a house to live in, and one next door to me, and the one at the end of the thing, who sent all our kids to as soon as it happened. She were about the only two that I really knew. I really didn't have a lot of extra time because I spent a lot of time teaching, taking some more classes, trying to figure out how to do it better. And I don't know. They called it work, but I thought it was kind of fun.
Did you have a good relationship with your neighbors?
Yeah. Daisy, yeah. You know, when you get to be my age, you have another problem. You don't have very many friends left because Daisy's dead. And she was just really wonderful. Her daughter, they put their daughter on the bus in integration. There are only two in the whole neighborhood that did it. And they're my two friends. I wonder why. I can't imagine why. And yeah, we did things with them, went places with them, and they came and visited us in Arizona and visited us up north and stuff like that. Yeah, I miss her a lot. I do.
What was your experience with the Milwaukee race riots or the fair housing riots?
The riots?
Yes.
It's hard to say. My husband's father had a business on 12th and North Avenue. And he had always had really pretty good relationships with the community. My husband worked for him too. And they sought out to be friendly in the neighborhood. And somehow when all those riots and things, his place wasn't touched. And we never know why. We'll never know why, but it wasn't. I don't know. I feel I'm not the one to solve this. I think it's all if you do little parts, but I just wish that people wouldn't have to fight to make their points, to hurt other people, to burn and do stuff like that. I know you can get as mad as heck, but I don't know what else there's. And I can understand that because they probably have tried everything and nobody listens to them. I don't know. I really don't know what I think of it. I think of, I'm glad I have never had to be in that kind of a position to be that angry. I've been angry, pretty angry, but I'm not going to hit you. Might be hard not to, but I'll throw a tomato at you.
Did you ever have an encounter with Mayor Meyer?
With who?
Mayor Meyer?
No. The guy that lived next door to me worked for him. That's as closest I ever wanted to be to him. End of conversation. I think he was had Alzheimer's the last couple of years. Because I think that actually if we look over his track record for a long time, I think he did some really pretty positive things. But all of a sudden he didn't know where he was. No, but no, I didn't have any. I'm glad I didn't have to.
It seems like your relationship with him was kind of negative. So why do you think, or why was that?
I don't think that they came up with policies that. I don't think they were very helpful to the problem that we were, and I don't like to say the problem, they weren't very helpful to the need that we were experiencing in the city that was just starting. Because in his tenure, there really wasn't any talk about it. I mean, they didn't talk about it. Open housing didn't have it. I mean, so I think that he could have, if he was, could have, should have, would have, some programs that weren't just one-day programs. I think now, today, some of those programs where they have jobs and they give those jobs to minorities in the summertime or something, I think they've been helpful. Not just for the jobs, but for the being together with other people doing something.
Did you participate in any open housing marches?
You know, any open housing? No, I did not.
What were your thoughts on that issue?
What were my thoughts? On what?
On the open housing.
On open housing? I think it should be. And I don't think it's, I don't know, I don't see it happening right now, but I think it should be happening. And, you know, there's still that thing that sticks in people's heads, that as soon as we start integrating the communities, somebody runs. And then somebody else thinks, I better follow him. And before everything has changed. I don't know where that stops. I don't know how you stop it. I really don't. I mean, it's, you know, what I think would be a funny thing is to take a white person and put them in a black neighborhood and have all the black people run. Wouldn't that be cute? I don't know where the answer is. I don't know. It wouldn't bother me. I live in a condominium, and I think I was just telling this guy over here. I have a black man living next door to me, and his name is Walter. And he's about your size. He's pretty big. And he's a plumber. And I said, Walter, how did you ever get to be a plumber? And he was a plumber in my school, and I didn't know the plumber in my school. And he said, well, it was real hard, because he's about 76 years old. Now, you look back to when he was 18 or 20 years old. They didn't let black people get apprenticeships. Not very often. Whether it's electricians or plumbing or any of those things were really very closely guarded. And they didn't let black people get in. And I said, well, how did you manage it? And he said, I just kept saying to myself, I'm just as good as anybody else. I'm just as good as anybody else. And he said, and then I did get in. And Walter and I get along real fine. And he's now older, and he's 76, you see. He has white hair and a white beard. And I said, Walter, what are you doing, trying to turn into a white person? And he says, oh, geez, you got me on that one. So we joke back and forth, and we mean it honestly. I see he's black. He sees I'm white. You're not going to change what you see. So be honest about it. If I don't like Walter, I don't like Walter. But I do like Walter. And, you know, and things hang on, you know, because of that, because of discrimination. Things hang on. A lady in a condo, about 1, 2, 3, left her keys in the door. And Walter came and knocked at my door, and he said, what's her name? Her keys are in her door and on the outside. And I said, well, just take them to her. And Walter said, I can't take them. You'll have to go with me. Why did he say that? Why couldn't he just knock on her door and say, your keys were in your door? Because he was a black man and she was white? Sure, that was it. That's why he had to get me. And that's terrible. He's 76 years old. And this is still hanging in him, that he doesn't do that. I mean, that should not happen. That has to stop. Sorry. End the lecture.
All right, we're good.